New Buddhaware Dhamma Talks. Jeff Hunt presents a talk on some aspect of the Buddha's teaching.
We live in a society which has generated this phenomenon of stress. If you think about it, what we're generally referring to is goal-oriented behavior which sets up frustration about achieving those goals within the parameters that have been set for you. So we have a very goal-oriented society. We're all trying to get something. We're all trying to arrive somewhere. We all want to be someone else or have something more than we have. And this indeed is the driving force of the society that we live in at the moment. It used to be called progress, and I think we are now beginning to see it's more like a regress in the kind of damage that it's doing all around us, not only to the environment and to societies, but to us as individuals and our mental health. Depression, for example, is on the increase. We live in a society which seems to have set some sort of collective but rather dark goal for itself. We don't know what this goal exactly is, but it seems to be something like total control and total material success, which rather obviously is unobtainable. Whole of the working day seems to be arranged around this idea. In fact, it's so deeply ingrained that we can't really imagine a society or a lifestyle in which that is not the case. You're going to have the question of achieving those goals, and you're going to have the question of what happens when I don't achieve those goals. That's frustration, and a lot of stress is about frustration. It's about not achieving or getting or being either where you want to be or where it's been dictated to you, you ought to be. Since I'm talking largely now about the workplace, we can think about that, although we do need to generalize it. In the workplace, we have pressures, we have deadlines. Deadline is a concept that captures the idea, I think. A dead line is a line to death, to live with deadlines, that something has to be achieved in a certain time period, and there may be adverse consequences if you do not achieve. Subjectively, of course, I feel unhappy. I may feel I'm a failure. I may worry about some dire consequences of not achieving what has been set for me, some sort of goal, some sort of performance target. And this is the phenomenon of stress, isn't it? The physical and mental impact of reaching or not reaching the goals that we have set for ourselves. And as I say, those may be goals which you're setting for yourself, which you can do something about, or they may be goals that have been set for you. And if they're goals that are set for you, well, think about this. If there is no goal, there is no stress. If there is no attempt to achieve a goal, there is no stress. If there is no experience of frustration, then there is no stress. It's worth keeping this in mind. Everything has its conditions. When goals are set for us and we don't feel we have a choice about it, well, what makes the stress worse in some cases is that it's not a goal that I actually want to have in my life, but I feel I have to pursue that goal. Why? Because I need an income, because I need to pay a mortgage, or whatever. So I may actually hate my job, but I'll do it. Well, that's setting me up for stress to start with, because now I'm pursuing a goal, but it's not a goal I want to pursue. Not really. Well, what do we do about that? Well, in general, think about whether you could change the goal, make it nearer to one that you would find acceptable. modify it in some way, eliminate it or modify it. That's not so easy though, is it? On the other hand, remember that there is no such thing as a goal without the chaser of a goal. There has to be someone that's chasing the goal. Goals don't exist by themselves. There are no goals, objectively. So, we human beings, we create these goals. Some we have some choice about, and some we don't have so much choice about. But all these goals are actually up here. So there's a little bit of hope there, because I can start thinking about not the stressor, the thing that is causing the stress, but my attitude towards it. So we've already said, we could eliminate goals or modify goals to some extent. We'll always think about that. But one thing that I can do is become aware of the fact of my stress, that I know when I'm stressed, and I can come to understand my stress and modify that instead. So that is an approach based on mindfulness of one state of mind. In this case, the state of mind we call stress, which basically is anxiety. It's anxiety and worry about not achieving a goal. Okay, I've narrowed it down. It's other things as well, but let's talk about one thing at a time. If it's not really the stressor, it's me, then the first thing I can do is become aware of when I'm stressed and be aware of how I feel when I'm not stressed. So this is the self-awareness that we teach along this path. If I get to recognize my stress and know its contours, know if you like, the geography of my stress, as it feels to me subjectively, then I can start to adapt my behavior and also let go, perhaps, of whole chunks of stress. So the first thing is to be aware when one is stressed, how one is feeling when one is stressed, and whether one can do anything. For example, the next step would be to create some sort of gap in one's response to this thing that I'm perceiving as the stressor, e.g. meeting a certain deadline. I'll take an even more trivial example. I've got to get this report out by 2 o'clock. I've left it to the last minute because I was doing other things I had to do, and just told the computer to print, and then the paper gets stuck in the printer. And I've got 5 minutes to go into a meeting with my report and hand out this document. Right, this is what we call explosive stress time. Right, I might like to shout my head off, I might like to blame someone, I might like to kick the printer or throw it out of the window. My blood pressure is now going up. I feel very unhappy. It's all a bit sad, isn't it? But it's very, very typical of our lifestyle, and there's a coming together of a number of factors that make this a stressful situation. If I become aware of how it feels, this kind of anxiety feels, and I can then will know when it's starting to appear in me because I recognize it. That's possible now because I'm not focused on the printer. I'm focused on what's going on in my mind. See, we have a strong tendency to objectify. So if I'm stressed, it's the fault of something or someone. But I'm not doing that now. I'm not going to kick the printer. Of course, you'll say, well, let's be pragmatic. Why don't we just try to get the paper out of the printer? Okay, I accept that. We could do that. But you could do it with anger, which is probably going to make things worse, or you could do it in calmness, which probably solve the problem. On the other hand, it might not. Okay, so now you're in that little gap where you're aware of how your feelings are going in a negative direction. You can say no to that. You can't say no to the paper in the printer that's got stuck, but you can say no going in that direction. That is, I'm not mentally attaching myself I'm not getting attached to the feeling, the response that I am making to that situation. Because you see, I will cling to it almost immediately. Then clinging to it, I am now not in a state actually to make very good decisions about anything. But if I can become aware of how my stress, my subjective sense of stress is developing, I can then say, well, I'm not going to let the irritation develop. I'm not going to let the anger develop. I'm not going to start shouting at anybody. I'm not going to start blaming anybody. I'm just going to wait. Do nothing. Do nothing for 5 seconds. Do nothing for 10 seconds. What is 10 seconds? It makes a world of difference. 10 seconds wait in which one does not become angry, irritated, blaming, etc., are 10 very precious seconds, and actually can be the difference between life and death on occasion. If a pilot has got a red light in his aeroplane popping up, and you're a passenger, would you rather one that is going to stay calm and not overreact, or you're one that's going to get now so focused on that red light, he's going to feel panicky and want to do something about it, and what he does is the wrong thing? You see, the thing about panic or stress is that it narrows down one's focus. And that's very dangerous in some situations, but it's also just not a good idea in maintaining some happiness. Once irritation and anger, for example, grow, then reaction will happen. And that is physical reaction. Do something. One thing we can learn to do always in almost any situation is to pause. To get to know the feelings of one's mental responses to situations. Understand that now your attention is narrowing down, because with a deadline, you become very, very obsessed with the deadline and not notice other things going on that might actually help you. There might be a printer in the next room or on the next floor. Maybe somebody that you somebody that could help you in some way. Maybe it doesn't matter that much whether it's handwritten or printed. Maybe you could transfer it to a handheld computer, an iPad or something, and just take that into the meeting with you. See, all of that becomes much more probable in your thinking if you haven't narrowed it down to... See, people don't understand attention, what attention is. We think that attention is like putting your hand out and, like, I'm attending to this bell. Right. So it's as though my mind is going out and is now attending to the bell. Actually, this is not what is happening. What is happening is that the mind is closing down everything except its perception of the bell. Now, when you see that that is what is happening, there are repercussions. Because now you're closing down your field of attention, whereas in fact you should be opening it. So you should actually not be letting go of the spaciousness of your mind. You should in fact be trying to keep it. But you see, once it becomes afraid, it will immediately narrow down. You can understand why, from a survival point of view. If a snake pops up, you've got to say, well, what is that? Is that a snake or not? Is it going to bite me or not? Should I run like hell or not? Right? So it has its survival value. But the downside is that everything else is closing down. And that is the whole nature of attention and the way it works. You see, stress is that closing down of the mind due to a kind of almost obsessive fear, which then will tend to take off and generate more problems and more fear, which has its impact on the body. And of course, over a long period of time, can make the body very sick. Don't think of the stressor, think of how you feel. Pay awareness to what is developing in you in this, let's call it a situation. Create a gap, a pause, wait, even if it's only seconds, to understand what is going on in you, and your refusal to get overly focused. Keep your mind open to understanding and to alternatives. Look, in other words, maintain some sense of the bigger picture. It's not the stressor, it's you that is getting stressed. You are allowing yourself to be stressed. So one thing we need to do is pause, to understand our stress, to look into it, to see the feeling of it, and also to maintain a kind of spacious attention, not allow it to be closed down. Get to know yourself as well, because we all react differently, don't we? I mean, some people are quite good at managing stress, but probably because they're doing a lot of things I've just described, whereas other people have an immediate reaction and immediately get very focused and then cannot be pulled away from that focus. You know, the person that gets very angry about something and you're trying to calm them down, but they're kind of locked into it. They're very stressed, actually. No, they're suffering their anger. That's what stress is all about. So get to know yourself. Which kind of person are you? Because that's important too, to know your own character, because we're all slightly different. And that means that you can avoid certain things, or take evasive action, or whatever. Should be obvious, but on the other hand, it's quite sad to see how people will sometimes choose jobs or choose situations which are not suited to them at all. And then, surprise, surprise, they're very stressed. Probably because, well, it may be because they have no choice, but if they do have a choice, it could be just they just don't understand themselves. Do animals show stress? Well, not like we do. Because you see, when I start getting stressed, I also probably put another layer on it by feeling failure or getting angry with myself. You know, why am I always getting stressed? Why am I always feeling so angry? Nothing seems to work for me. So I'm now adding another layer by judging myself. You put an animal, a wild animal, in the zoo and it's in a cage, it will get stressed. But it's not judging itself, and it's not judging the human beings that have put it there either, actually. But it is stressed. Why? Because its whole instinctual, habitual nature is to run around in, you know, large open spaces, and now it can't do that. So it is obstructed, it is blocked. It is feeling a kind of natural frustration, which is the stress that it suffers. We then put another layer on that because we are conscious creatures. So then we think about the future. We're obsessed with the future. We regret the past. Now we're embellishing the whole thing and making it much worse than any animal would ever experience. See, understanding what is going on in oneself and seeing the nature of it helps a great deal. The key to it is to realize it's not actually the stressor. It's your response to it. That's the key thing. That's the basic lesson here, which has general application to life. The mindful approach would be, next time the paper gets stuck in the printer, you say, well, thank you very much. Right, thank you. Now, as a little teacher here, she's going to teach me something. Now I'm very grateful for this situation. It's given me an opportunity to look into myself and see how I feel about this, and whether I can pause, and whether I can keep my mind open, rather than narrowing it down and, the animal sort of rears up in me, right? In other words, just actually by saying, oh, thank you very much, but not sarcastically, but almost as though, because that is how we learn, actually, isn't it? I mean, we learn from those we don't really learn anything from things going well for us. So maybe we should be grateful when things don't go so well. They are life's lessons.
New Buddha way lets go of East and West and starts afresh in the life we have now. For more information, visit www.newbuddhaway.org.